educator and researcher, Stenhouse. I forget his first name. I want to say John, but I don't think that's it. Lawrence Stenhouse, used the term teacher research for the first time to talk about research designed and conducted by teachers, by people who live with the interactive dynamic of education, as opposed to people who come from the outside. And what's interesting, though, and this may even be the connector piece, is that Stenhouse has some cultural and contextual history behind him. About a decade before, in the 1950s, in England also. Okay, so epistemology. Maxwell Jones was a psychiatrist working with patients who had mental illness and strongly developed the group therapy model, the idea that mental health patients, and particularly people with addictions, might have the key to their, as most people might know or guess, it's one of the 5 major, their own salvation within their experience in community with others. There's a great book about some of his work called Community as Method. And so what he did was he experimented with patient-managed therapy. And of course, there was a great deal of resistance. People basically said the inmates are running the asylum. Branches of philosophy, the others being politics, metaphysics, aesthetics, and ethics. And you really can't have research of any kind without epistemology, because epistemology is the branch of science, a branch of philosophy, I'm sorry, that deals with knowledge and knowledge creation and knowledge construction. And what does it mean to say you know something? And that's what research is about. It's about trying to know something. It's about trying to see, what is happening here and what is true and what is not true and what is true under certain circumstances, what is true for who. So it's all about knowledge. And so what does it mean to say you know something? I know this. Well, does it mean you memorized it? Maybe. Does it mean you experienced it? Does it mean you've internalized it? And what does that mean? Does it mean you ate it? Like, how do you operationalize what it means to know something? Which was kind of true, literally. So teacher research, I think, comes out of that, the idea that, and I think it was Paulo Freire who said the person with the problem is the person with the solution. So what's interesting is that teacher research in its functioning is sort of the dynamic opposite of action research. It may connect to outer issues, but it's really personal, it's individual. It may connect to larger contexts, but it's really about an individual teacher or a small group of teachers identifying a challenge that they want to explore. A personal learning curve, something in their own teaching, in their own classroom context that they feel they need to do better in order to teach their students better, because maybe their students don't learn the way they teach. So there's a centripetal focus, a sort of inward focus. And it really does seek to explore and articulate beliefs, attitudes, assumptions, biases, subjectivity, as a way of enhancing your role as a decision maker, and this is a millennia's old question. I mean, it really goes back to the roots of recorded philosophy, at least Western philosophy, and the conflict between Aristotle and Plato, although it touches a bit on metaphysics there. But the idea, is there one reality or are there multiple realities? And that's really more metaphysical. But if we stick just with epistemology, so how do you know that you know something? And when you ask that question, it sort of reflects in on itself, and that's where philosophy gets a bad name. That's where people accuse it of being navel-gazing or elite or even irrelevant. But it's not enough for most questioning minds, like teachers, to just say they know something, or a student to say they know something. How do you know what you know? And then there are other political dimensions, like who is allowed to say they know? Who has the authority and the power to say this is true, and worse or better, this is what you should be doing? And that's where teachers often get this sort of apprehension about research because it often comes at them with someone else's authority. You know, teachers are often handed research by principals and saying, this is what you should be doing, but you're not. Actual agent. And what's very interesting is that although teacher research doesn't necessarily seek to create the same kind of change that action research does explicitly, when you read good teacher research, the language of change is all through it. Usually it's personal change. It's an awareness. You know, I teach differently now. I see things differently now. I've learned how to listen better. So, so those are the sort of two differences. So they, as I said, they share a common foundation in looking at qualitative methodology, but they have different trajectories. So that's